3.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Idiomatic Top 3.
With Nicholas, I am the gaming correspondent for Idiomatic.
And I am Dimitri, editor-in-chief of Idiomatic and movie critic. Today we're going to talk about...
James Bond.
That's right, we're doing Over Under James Bond. Which, by the way, I believe is a scene in one of the Ian Fleming novels. So we're going to talk about our favorite James Bond movies and our least favorite James Bond movies. Which means a whopping 4 picks instead of 3. Yay! This ought to be interesting because I am not a retro James Bond fan, and well, Nick, you know them a lot more than I do.
I've seen them all. I like most of them.
Let's get to it. Let's get to our overrated picks.
So, what would be your first overrated pick, Dimitri?
Moonraker. Do not care for Moonraker at all. That's a Roger Moore one. That's the one where he goes on a space station. James Bond is space. This is where it loses me. Like exotic locales, yes. Science fiction locales, not so much for me. I love the exotic locales in James Bond. This was a studio set, so it was very boring to me.
Before going to space, though, he goes to a few places on Earth.
He does.
Yeah.
He does.
But that movie has one of the best henchmen ever. Jaws. No movies with Jaws can be bad. Come on.
I get what you're saying, and I admit Jaws is a lot of fun, but like the main villain, like Hugo Drax, who's played by Michael Longsdale, he looks like the leader from Hulk, and I find that so distracting.
And I will admit that he plays it without emotions. He plays like the cold guy. That, I guess he's in space, so he's cold. But yeah, he's not very emotional as a bad guy, and yeah, he's not great. I did enjoy the movie and the action, though. To me, it's still a pretty good movie. Not one of the best ones.
I gotta admit, it has the Bond girl has a pretty funny name, because the Bond girls always do, of course.
Yeah.
She's named Holly Goodhead.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yes, it is. Well, my first overrated, Casino Royale.
I'm so with you on that.
I did not care for most of the action, which when we talk about action, we're talking about them playing cards. Playing poker, watching poker on TV, it's good because you don't know what cards are going to come. It's random, and you can see the psychology of the player. Seeing people playing poker in the movie and having high stakes is really boring because the cards are set by the script. It's really, really lame. Oh, I have a great hand. Oh, I have an even better hand than you. Well, duh.
No, I agree with you completely. For me, cards in movies specifically, I find the movies always do it wrong by having the players have great cards. And anybody who's actually a fan of card games, of poker in particular, knows that the most exciting hands are where everybody has crap hands and they're playing each other. That's where it gets exciting. Where the money starts rolling and everybody has crappy hands,
Yeah. That's true.
And screenwriters always get that wrong. They think the more exciting the hand, the more exciting the game is going to be. And it's like, no, unless you're the player, a good hand is not that exciting.
Yeah. Not to say that the movie had some good points. Like the action was good. And see like the new James Bond being green a little bit and not being great at his James Bondishness. It was fun, but the whole casino part just ground the movie to
To a halt.
To a halt, yeah. And they tried to make it exciting, like, they tried to kill James Bond while he's playing cards, but no, they're still playing cards. It was very boring.
I like the movie more than you do. I still think it's overrated because everybody is sort of like, they'll give their firstborn son to this movie, and I'm like, come on, it's okay. There are some bits that are great in it, and there's bits that are really like, whatever. In terms of the action scenes, like the parkour pursuit in the opening sequence, that was kick-ass awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And the car flipping over when he's in the middle of the street, that was filmed really excellently. It's just so exciting when you see that scene.
Yeah.
And as well as actually the final battle is not the most exciting, but I kind of like the concept of the building falling apart when they're fighting. And it was sort of like a Mario stage.
Although, again, that building was just a building that's floating. All of a sudden, that scene just, I don't know.
Well, it's not floating; it's actually falling apart and sinking.
Yeah. But, how often does that, like the parkour thing, you could see people, I can see him jumping through stuff, I was familiar with, he's jumping from roof to roof, he's doing this, he's doing that, construction site, I can see that. Have not seen floating buildings often in my life, so it was like, okay.
Sinking. Well, it's sinking.
Yeah, but it used to float before they made it sink.
Well, it's in Venice. It's actually built over the water. It's not floating.
To me, it was like, that's convenient. They just have a building to make it sink. It was kind of weak for me.
Well, they did set it in Venice. They didn't invent the Venice setting. But Venice is already a city on the water.
I'm not a Venice, connoisseur. I'm not sure, how are all the buildings over there like that, or did they just end up with one that can sink? And it just seemed like forced to me.
I didn't have that problem at all. But the movie does grind to a halt right in the middle. The movie has one of the most convoluted plots from the villain using they're using a principle that exists in stock exchange where you essentially put your money towards the failure of a certain thing.
Yeah.
But then they have this terrorist strike to cause that failure, and for me that doesn't ring true because these things do happen in real life, and it's not that company that sinks, it's the entire industry that sinks when that happens, because investors and traders tend to think that, if this can happen to this company, it can happen to any other company in the same industry.
Yeah.
So that didn't ring true at all for me, and so that sort of just drove the entire movie towards like, okay, well, just nonsense, whatever. And then the poker thing with, this is what angers me, is that the two players, like, mild spoiler alert, well, not even a spoiler because I won't tell you who gets what, but the two players get the two best hands possible in the entire game.
Yeah.
What are the chances of that? And that's just silly.
And even before that, the two players, because it's a 4-player hand, and the two players before them get full houses.
Oh, for real?
For real.
Oh my god, I didn't even remember that bit.
So it's like 2 full houses, a 4 of a kind, and a royal flush in one, one draw. Seriously.
Yeah, well, granted, it's Texas Hold'em, and the flop in particular was, it was a nice high flop there, so it does maximize the chances of that happening. But still, 4 people? Yeah. That's crazy. And it's also because you have the character with the highest hand, and the character with the second highest hand. And the character with the second highest hand is looking around, and he's hesitating, and then he goes all in. And it's like, that's normal play for me, because in the sense of he's pretending to hesitate, let's say, and he's putting all his money in. And then the character with the highest hand just sort of like, is he bluffing or not? It's like, you have the highest hand, who cares?
Yeah, I know.
You have the highest possible hand, it doesn't matter. And he's already gone all in, so you've already won. All you have to do is say, okay.
Yeah, and people who know poker, when the person has the nuts, then the person, all right, I'll go all in, and you haven't beat. It's immediate. I call.
Yeah!
Immediate.
Because it's like, and he's bluffing, and then the people who, claim that I don't know poker going like, yeah, but he's bluffing. It's like, but the other guy's already all in. There's nothing to bluff for. He's already won. And Daniel Craig at that point is still not quite comfortable with the James Bond character, I find.
Yeah.
Of course, they have him be a character who's, slowly embracing the James Bond persona, so you could argue that might have been intentional. But at the same time, you're paying for a James Bond movie. You're sitting there and you're like, but that's not quite James Bond yet,
Exactly. So when you go to see James Bond, you want to see James Bond first and foremost, and then the action follows.
Yeah. All right, moving on.
So what is your second overrated pick?
Did not care for Die Another Day. I don't know how overrated it is because it is critically panned, but you've seen those like Hollywood top 10s and whatever.
Yeah.
Everybody's praising how awesome Halle Berry is as a Bond girl. She's the first Bond girl who really stands up to James Bond and like a real emancipated woman. And I'm looking at that and going like, really? Because Michelle Yeoh spent most of Tomorrow Never Dies kicking his ass.
Yeah.
And being better than him at, stealth and robbing stuff. Is like, she continuously, humiliated him. And that was sort of the running joke in Tomorrow Never Dies that makes Tomorrow Never Dies so funny.
Yeah.
So, like, why is Halle Berry getting all that attention and not, Michelle Yeoh?
She's American?
Maybe, and I don't understand that. Especially since the Halle Berry character doesn't really do anything worthwhile, and Halle Berry plays it like she plays a lot of her roles when it's not an independent movie with a director that's actually pushing her, or she just sort of phones it in and has her smile throughout and is like, "I'm confident." And it's like, well, that's nice, but how about a character next time?
Yeah.
I don't know why Halle Berry has a southern accent in my world, but. And then the movie itself. Oh, what a dumb movie.
So they start in Korea, where they're using hovercrafts to avoid landmines to do traffic of diamonds or weapons trafficking or whatever. And then it goes to Cuba, where they're changing the DNA to end up in one of the northern countries over there within an ice palace. And I couldn't follow what the hell is happening here.
Oh, it's so campy. It's like 1966 Batman. It is so campy and over the top. You have to battle the supercars, which I admit I thought was pretty funny at the time. But again, in the context of a movie that comes off mostly like a farce.
Yeah.
I was offended by a plot point. This is a mild spoilers for those of you who haven't seen it. I was really offended by the idea of the Korean guy, villain, having all the opportunities in the world, as he explains. That's the way he explains it. Yeah. And so naturally, having all the opportunities in the world to better himself, he makes himself white. And it's the sort of thing you find in Hollywood a lot, where Asian self-hatred, big in Hollywood. Asian men in particular should be ashamed of being Asian. It's a recurring theme in Hollywood, and it so did not belong in a James Bond movie. Especially, I was really, really pissed off by that.
So if he had been Asian and had turned himself into an Indian, would that have been fine? No,
it's just why do Asians so badly have to be ashamed of being Asian? It's only white people feel that way about Asians.
Short penis?
Well, they have pumps for that. You don't need to actually dig into your spinal cord and change your DNA. And go into a dream machine. Like, where does the dream machine come into that?
Because when your DNA changes, you can't dream anymore, apparently.
And then he has to wear a super armor to fight James Bond at the end. And it looks like, I kid you not, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, it looks like a Nintendo equipment. It looks like an 8-bit Nintendo equipment.
I like supervillains that take over the world, but that was like over the top. I mean, seriously.
The only redeeming quality in this, well, there's three. A, still Pierce Brosnan is still funny. B, John Cleese as the new Q or R in this movie, very funny stuff. C, Rosamund Pike, so hot.
Oh yeah, she's hot.
But that is it. The rest of the movie is other tart, man.
Yes, I agree.
Alright, so your pick for Overrated?
Overrated? The World Is Not Enough. Which is a fine movie, but we talked about need a bad guy that needs to be like want to conquer the world and stuff like that. He's kind of a supervillain, but the bad guy, or I guess he's more the henchman at this point. They actually made him a supervillain in the comic book sense of it, as in he doesn't feel pain, he doesn't tire out. He needs to be like a superhuman now to be like a counter for James Bond. And, we talked about Jaws earlier. Jaws was just, big, strong, and goofy. He was goofy, but they played him as serious, as like he's like Captain America that can't feel pain. It just, as soon as
Captain America can feel pain.
Yeah, but
he felt a lot of pain.
That's why I said
after the terrorist attacks.
That's why I said Captain America that can't feel pain.
Oh, okay.
It's an extra power to Captain America that he can't feel pain in addition. And as soon as they said that, I was just, oh, you have got to be kidding me. And the fact that they played him serious in addition to that, I was like, no, this is like the dumbest thing ever. The movie has other fun stuff, and the action is good. Didn't quite like, what's her face?
Denise Richards?
Denise Richards acting.
As Christmas Jones?
As Christmas Jones. Yeah, did not like her acting. One of the Bond girls wasn't great. The bad guy was so cartoony, and they tried to play him serious. It didn't work for me at all.
Well, that bleeds in. Are you done?
Yes.
Yeah. that bleeds into our underrated picks because my first underrated picks is actually The World Is Not Enough.
Oh, really?
I actually really like this movie a lot. I mean, I know where you're coming from in terms of, especially Dennis Richards. She hands it up like nobody's business. She really has a hard time acting in that movie. it's really weird and really distracting. And you didn't mention it, but the action scenes are sort of iffy in some of the scenes. This was a documentary filmmaker that moved in to make that James Bond movie, and you could see that he hadn't quite figured out how to stage an action film yet.
Yeah.
But okay, well, let's address Renard, who is the bad guy played by Robert Carlyle that you said that he can't feel pain and he's superhuman. I didn't take it quite the same way. I didn't see him as superhuman. It is a known illness. There are people who have that illness where they can't feel pain or injury.
Yeah.
That usually actually makes them in mortal danger because when they bleed, they don't feel it, so they could bleed to death. But it is a real life illness, and I didn't see it as a superhuman thing. I just saw it as something to gauge your attentions toward him so that the movie can have its twist, like because Renard is actually a red herring in that movie.
Yeah.
And then the movie takes a completely different twist where Renard turns out not to be the main villain, and there's another villain that actually is the villain, and he's just a henchman.
I don't know. The red herring would have been that he's actually a good guy, but you know.
No, he's not. It's not a red herring because he's not the mastermind. He's a red herring,
I guess.
And who turns out to be the bad guy has just great motivation. It's the person playing that bad guy is just such an accomplished performer in general.
Yeah.
I'm trying to sort of not mention who it is to keep it spoiler free because I think it is one of those great twists. And it also sort of progresses. I find that the first three movies of Pierce Brosnan, not counting Die Another Day, actually have a really clear progression as to James Bond's attitude towards women, where he faces women in a different position.
I guess.
Faces women in a different position for James Bond that came out wrong.
Yes.
But because in the first one, of course, he's James Bond in a feminist world. In the second one, he's James Bond being surpassed by the Bond girl.
Yeah.
And the third one, he is facing a situation where he has to kill a Bond girl, which of course he's never had to face before.
That's true.
To kill a Bond girl as a bad guy is to finally admit that women are equal to him, and he has a hard time doing that in the movie at some point. And it's just a progression towards that, and that thing worked really well, and it was in the context of a story where the scheme made sense, which is one of the rare things in James Bond. And there was a lot of emotional thing. I think that's where the movie where they started building on his relationship with M as something a little bit more filial. And I thought that was a nice touch. The character stuff is just above what you usually find in a James Bond movie. And that's what I really like, without it betraying the James Bond character.
But, and again, you know, bad guys in James Bond movies, they're usually killed after, like, a huge fight sequence or huge action scene and stuff like that. And the bad guy in this movie, it's just bang. And you know,
well, it's not just bang, because the emotional turmoil behind that because of James Bond's progression as a modern man.
But the action is really when he kills Renard, who is the
Renard is the muscle to, like, even in that fight, he's not superhuman. He doesn't do anything that's superhuman. He doesn't Hulk out and dishes out his Green Lantern ring or anything.
But he doesn't feel pain, and he's like this.
But that doesn't actually play into the movie, into the final battle.
Yeah, and he doesn't get tired, so he can fight.
But that doesn't play into the final battle because James Bond doesn't tire either. It's just two guys fighting into. I actually like that set piece actually with the tubes and all of that. I actually like that set piece. But it is not played superhuman.
We're talking about the internet. We're talking about tubes now.
And it is not played as superhuman.
But still, I didn't. That's just it. Just annoyed me, and then he's just
I really had a different interpretation than you on that. And one thing I want to mention in the movie's favor as well. The garbage saw at the beginning. That's actually one of my favorite James Bond songs. "The World Is Not Enough" it's just a great song.
Well, yeah, a lot of people have in the past have not taken the James Bond thing seriously, and this is the name of the movie. Do something with it, and they're not the James Bond songs sometimes are not great.
Yeah, but this one was.
Yeah. I mean, try and write a song about Moonraker.
When the moon hits the sky like a big pizza pie, it's Moonraker.
They had something to work with, and they wrote a great song, and like the world is not enough.
Well, it's a great line to begin with, actually.
Exactly.
The way it plays into the movie
yes.
is actually really good.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't fit well.
Yeah, well, I think in one of your picks I'll get to make fun of that,
Yes.
but in the World of Not Enough, as actually, not only does it play well into it, it actually adds dramatic impact that it is the title, and it has so much relevance to where the characters are at that point. It's that stuff that I like. I completely understand why you would like it less, because it is a very different James Bond movie. It is a lot more character-based, and, you know, and I don't mean that as a criticism, but James Bond fans don't go there to see the characters, you know?
Exactly.
But, if, you know, for any fan who's sort of interested in a different take of James Bond, I think that movie is totally worth your time.
We can agree to disagree.
Oh, I hate when people say that.
It's the best cliche ever.
Oh, I hate it. Because it always indicates somebody that doesn't agree to disagree. Like, if you have to say that you have to agree to disagree, it's because you're the sort of person who really needs the last word. All right, your pick, please.
My pick is the first Timothy Dalton movie, The Living Daylights. People don't like him because they don't like Timothy Dalton as James Bond.
Yeah, he's I mean, next to George Lazenby, obviously, he's the least liked James Bond.
And I like him. I like him. He's like a little more emotional, especially with Bond girls he's protecting. He doesn't keep this cold distance that the previous James Bond had. But, you know, and Living Daylight is a little different than the previous Bonds. The previous Bonds had focused a lot on action and stuff like that, whereas this one is more really like a spy movie about like a trade of drug against weapons that's going on, and, you know, James Bond has to figure out what's happening and who's the culprit, and, you know, stop the trade. And it's more spy based than it is action based. There's more like, you know, a spy that kills people and, you know, tries to figure out stuff than it is about exploding, you know, explosions and destroying airplanes and stuff like that. So that's probably why people like it more. But as a spy story, it's very good, actually. It's very intricate.
I don't know that I would see it as a spy story. I see it more as an undercover cop story in terms of the tropes they play with, I find.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that.
And actually, that's the thing that I like less about that movie. It's not that it's bad. It's actually treated fairly well. It's just that when I came into James Bond, I would accept the spy thing. I would certainly expect the larger-than-life James Bond thing, because that's what I came in to see. The undercover cop thing sort of threw me for a loop when I went to see it, where it's like, I don't know that that's what I was in the mood for, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you still get the action, the souped-up car and the explosions, and so you still get some of that. But, yeah, it's true that it played more, I guess, like an undercover cop thing, so yeah, I agree.
Why is it called in The Living Daylights?
It's probably after a novel, but the way they plug the scent in the movie, because the whole thing starts when James Bond, he has to protect a person, and there's a sniper, and it's a cute girl. So James Bond cannot kill a cute girl. So instead of killing her, she just shoots the weapon, and he gets chastised out of that. And, you know, you were supposed to kill her, but that not killing her brings, you know, it starts the whole thing. And, you know, he says like, I didn't kill her, but I scared the living daylights out of her, and that's why the movie is called Living Daylights.
Yeah, when they plug those sentences, sometimes it doesn't always work.
Yeah, exactly. That was that. You hear that and it's like, ew, that's weak.
Speaking of plugging titles, here's my here's my picks for underrated. I got Quantum of Solace. Quantum of Solace was really not appreciated by longtime James Bond fans, and I actually think it's better than Casino Royale.
I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's a good James Bond movie.
And this is where we disagree.
I'll agree to that.
Because here's the thing. You have the big villain with a big scheme, with a big ridiculous scheme, which this scheme is a little bit more realistic, because that's actually what happened in Bolivia.
Yeah, it's very underwhelming for the world. He controls the water in Bolivia. Okay.
Yeah, and it's because it's something that's actually happened in the real world.
It happens in the real world, yeah, I understand, but I mean, what to do? Control the water in Bolivia. How does that impact me? I mean, like the world. No,
but it impacts the Bolivian people.
Yeah, but it's not a world thing. I mean, it's like
well, it ties into his big eco thing that he's going to use it to sort of make that even bigger. So, no, it ties into a big world scheme that I don't want it spoiled, but
Yeah, but still, it was very underwhelming as opposed to, oh, I'm going to control all the energy in the world. I'm going to control the water in Bolivia.
it's because he's at step one. James Bond stopped him at step one,
That's why it's boring.
Well, I don't think it's a boring movie.
Yeah. No, the scheme is boring. It stopped at step one.
Okay, yeah. You of course have the exotic locales, which Casino Royale didn't. Well, it sort of did, but they were mostly inside through most of it. This one actually does have exotic locales.
Yeah, it's a telescope they go to.
What are you talking about?
The boss base there, it's a telescope they're building, so it wasn't super exotic for me. It's the actual building where there's
Quantum of Solace?
Yeah, it doesn't have to know. The telescope is not Quantum of Solace, but the building where in the middle of the desert there.
Oh, okay.
That they're building a telescope there, so I was just laughing my head off because, no, that's not a henchman. That's not a base for a villain. It's a telescope facility.
Oh yeah, once you recognize the location where it's filmed, it sort of gets you out of the movie for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But of course the locales before.
But
are quite
I agree.
nice.
I agree. There's exotic locales.
The stunts and action sequences are there. The action sequence, they're not as well filmed as in Casino Royale, but they're definitely there, and they're a hoot.
Yeah.
He does crazy stuff with parachutes at one point where I'm pretty sure you would have broken your legs.
Yeah.
And of course you have the James Bond character. I think he's a lot more firmly created. I know that this is where we disagree, but I find he has the one-liner. He does do them for his own amusement in this movie, where he pops out a couple of one-liners because he thinks it's funny to him.
Yeah.
And he has that cold detachment. It's just that they play it more human, kind of like they tried to do with Timothy Dalton, but more James Bond than Timothy Dalton. Timothy Dalton was just a lot more emotionally open, where here you have a guy who has a soft core, but sort of just shields it. There's this beautiful scene where one of his contacts and longtime friends croaks. And, he stays with that guy, and he's just being like a really stand-up friend, And then as soon as the guy dies, you're like, all right, well, let's look into his pockets and dump the body. It's played in such a cool way where it's like a switch for this guy, where it's like, he's capable of being warm. That's why he gets the Bond girl. But as soon as he doesn't need it, it doesn't make sense for him to be that way anymore. It's like stone cold, and I totally dug that.
I don't know. I didn't see... I could see him as James Bond again. He's so different than the, Sean Connery and Pierce Brosnan versions that I really enjoy. That, okay, he's kind of James Bondish. I can see that. No gadgets. He's a normal guy doing, an investigation. So where are the gadgets? Where are the
Doesn't he have? He used the gadgets to spy on the quantum people.
Yeah, spying.
That is a gadget.
Still. A spying gadget, anybody can spy. I mean, I need a watch that can fire bullets or something. That's a gadget.
And I think he must have used a gadget off screen to turn the final building into an exploding house of cards for no goddamn reason.
Yeah, that's true. And to me, it didn't have the giant world plot. It was like trying to get control of Bolivia. And, it was some guy trying to stop that. To me, it was just like a random action movie. A good action movie, mind you. But it wasn't James Bond. It was like...
Yeah, I don't know, because he's lost the trust of M, and everybody thinks, oh, he's out for vengeance for the girl he lost in Casino Royale.
Yeah. Because
this is the first James Bond that's a straight sequel. And it picks up immediately after Casino Royale. And then at the end, there's this great line. Mild spoiler alert. M tells him, is like, glad to have you back, James. And he's like, I never left. And it's so James Bond where it's like, I look reckless, but I knew what I was doing all along. And I think it's in the same vein as The World Is Not Enough, as in it's slightly more complex. It's the same tropes and the same characteristic of his personality, but they're sort of expressed internally instead of outwardly. And I think maybe that's what makes it a little bit less recognizable for general James Bond fans. But they are there. It's still James Bond.
I like outwardly. And they didn't plug the name of the movie in the movie, so that was just wrong.
No, it's like, Nick and I have this running joke of... Because Quantum of Solace, again, everybody was like, what does that title even mean? They do make reference to a bad guy organization named Quantum, but really what it refers to is just how how meaningless vengeance is, because there are several characters who are out for vengeance, and it just offers you a quantum of solace, a very small unit of comfort. And the title, I think when I read the title, I understood exactly what they meant as soon as they started the revenge plot. Most people apparently did, which is a bit of a mystery to me. I think they weren't trying very hard to understand what the movie's trying to say. But because they figured that people are not stupid, they didn't have that scene in the classic James Bond way where it's like, did you kill him? It's like, yes, and how did you feel after that? It offered me a quantum of solace. Like, they didn't do that.
Well, people would have gotten it if he had done it that way. It's like, oh, that's what they would have opened the dictionary, look up quantum, look up solace, and then they would have figured out.
Hopefully people don't need to look over solace in the dictionary. I think it's sad if they do. Because keep in mind, James Bond movies are PG-13, usually. So, at 13 you should know what solace means.
That's true.
Your final pick for underrated James Bond movie?
A View to a Kill. It's a movie where James Bond investigates microchips that are used to dope horses so that they run faster, but the bigger plan is that, the guy's making chips, so he wants to destroy Silicon Valley, so he has a monopoly, so he's going to destroy California by having it sink underwater. It makes no sense whatsoever, like James Bond usually does. The action is pretty fun. The action is fun. It did not do well at the box office, and I don't know why. So that's why it's underrated, I'm guessing. It's really a drop in the box office between, the other two.
Yeah, it was a sharp one.
Yeah, it was a sharp drop, and I don't know why. And the main part is Christopher Walken as the bad guy. So how can this movie not be awesome? And the line of the movie, A View to a Kill, is, said by the bad guy. So it's awesome.
What is the line again?
A View to a Kill.
No, but like how...
He's looking over San Francisco that's eventually going to sink into the ocean. And he says something about it being a beautiful view to a kill. Because he's expecting this city to, get this to sink.
Well, I'm not thrilled about that either. It's better than Tomorrow Never Dies, but...
Yeah, I know.
I think that's one of my favorite hokey ones, where it's like... I guess you'll always have tomorrow. But tomorrow never dies. And it's like, that doesn't actually fit in the context of that conversation.
At all.
Like, what happened there?
And, the music was done by Duran Duran. It was pretty good. They added the James Bond team to their normal, same sounding music, and it sounds different from their other stuff.
Speaking of, I don't know why, I'm just going to add it now, but Quantum of Solace. Worst James Bond song ever. It was Alicia Keys. I don't remember the other one. It's like, it doesn't sound like anything. It's like, you're listening to it just like, I don't even know what the melody is.
There's no melody. You don't. Her words are so detached. You stop. You try and figure out what one sentence means, and she's up with the next one. It's like, those sentences don't go well together at all.
I know, it's like da 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 da. It's like, where is this going? It's like entering a car where the driver is high. It's like what?
Yeah, not a great song at all.
If you have questions, comments you want to share with us, what are your favorite James Bond movies, your least favorites, overrated, underrated, please post a comment. We read your comments. We welcome them, and especially in the topic of those 20 James Bond movies. I am kind of curious which ones people still remember fondly and not,
I agree.
So I would really like to read your thoughts. See you next time.